The skies above Earth darkened as the Dominion fleet descended from the stars, a massive armada of warships that stretched across the horizon in ways the human eye had never before seen. Their sheer size enough to block out the sun. The first signs of their arrival were faint glimmers of light far above the atmosphere, growing steadily brighter until they became too blinding to ignore. No one had expected this. Humanity had never faced an enemy so vast, so powerful. The planet had seen wars, but never a war like this. At first, the world's governments were skeptical. Ambassadors and generals tried to make contact, sending messages to these new visitors, hoping for communication, even a peaceful resolution. But the response was not what they had hoped for. A single broadcast shattered all illusions of diplomacy. The Dominion spoke in cold, alien tones, and their message was clear: surrender or perish. Earth had two choices: join the Dominion and be ruled by them, or face utter destruction. No middle ground was offered, no second chances, no room for negotiation. The leaders of the world gathered in a tense emergency session, each of them struggling to make sense of what was happening as panic gripped the masses across the globe. Cities buzzed with rumors and fear. Politicians bickered, military leaders debated, and the media fanned the flames of chaos. All while the Dominion ships loomed larger on the edge of the atmosphere, threatening to bring their wrath down upon the planet if humanity failed to comply. Despite the overwhelming power the Dominion wielded, the people of Earth stood defiant, their resolve unwavering, and united in a way they had never been before. In the face of this alien threat, humanity set aside its differences and forged a common front. The message from Earth's leaders was blunt: humanity would not bow to invaders, no matter how superior their technology, no matter how many fleets they brought to bear. The Dominion had underestimated one thing: the spirit of humanity was not so easily extinguished. As the first alien ships began their descent into Earth's orbit, the countdown to war had begun. Humanity had made its choice, and there would be no turning back. The world's military scrambled to prepare, but it was clear they were outmatched. Their forces pale in comparison to the might of the alien invaders. Their weapons were small and outdated, and their space defense systems were no match for the Dominion's advanced technology. But there was a glimmer of hope hidden in Earth's corner. The human race had something that the Dominion could not predict, something that no amount of technology could account for: the will to fight, to protect their home, their families, and their future. The first blast came from the alien ships. It struck the planet with unimaginable force, sending shockwaves through Earth's atmosphere and causing buildings to crumble into dust. The sky turned red with fire, and the oceans roared in fury as the Earth trembled beneath the alien onslaught. But amidst the devastation, humanity rose to its feet: the soldiers, the civilians, the children, and the elderly, all fighting in their own ways, standing against the invaders in any way they could. The battle had begun. The Dominion thought they had already won, but they underestimated the humans' ability to adapt, to learn, to survive, and to rise even when faced with certain annihilation. Humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The war was no longer a choice, it was a matter of existence. The stakes had been set, and the Dominion would soon learn the hard truth about the price of underestimating humanity. The aftermath of the first assault left Earth in ruins. Entire cities lay in smoldering heaps of debris, while the wounded crawled through streets filled with the scent of smoke and burning metal. The Dominion ships hovered in the atmosphere, casting long shadows over the world, as if mocking humanity's resistance. The survivors had barely begun to grasp the scale of the devastation before the next wave of attacks began. The Dominion was relentless. They showed no mercy, no hesitation, as their forces rained down from above in calculated strikes designed to break the human spirit. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity refused to fall. Some retreated underground into bunkers hastily built for such an event. Others took to the streets to continue the fight with what little they had left. The world's remaining military forces rallied together, forming pockets of resistance across continents, each group more desperate than the last. But they fought on with determination and grit. For every alien strike that leveled a city, another handful of humans stood ready to rise and strike back. The human spirit was the one thing the Dominion hadn't accounted for, and it was beginning to show cracks in their confidence as the months wore on. The war became a slow, grinding battle. Earth's forces were pushed to their limits. The constant attacks from the skies left no time for respite, and little room for strategy. The human forces adapted quickly, but their resources were limited, and their weapons were outdated. They needed something more if they were to survive. In the depths of a forgotten military base, hidden beneath a mountain range, a team of scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to uncover a secret buried long before the war began. The base had once been a research facility for advanced technology, and though much of it had been destroyed or repurposed during the initial onslaught, there was one project that had been kept under wraps, far from the prying eyes of the public, a relic, something ancient and powerful, far older than anything humanity had encountered before. The relic had been discovered by accident deep within the Earth's crust during an exploratory mining operation. It was a strange object that seemed to defy the laws of science, a pulsing energy source that radiated warmth and power yet remained entirely alien in nature. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that no human eye could decipher, but the moment it was uncovered, something within it awakened, as if responding to the presence of humanity itself. The scientists working in the base were cautious but hopeful as they began to study the relic. They quickly discovered it was more than just a source of power. It was a conduit, something that could amplify human abilities beyond anything imaginable. Its energy seemed to resonate with the human body in a way that no other technology had done before. At first, it was small increments, a burst of speed, a momentary increase in strength. But over time, they realized this was not just a weapon, it was a key to unlocking humanity's potential in ways they never dreamed possible. But with each step forward came new risks. The more they tapped into the relic's power, the more they began to understand the true cost of using it. It didn't just enhance human capabilities. It changed them. The human mind and body began to adapt, but not without consequence. Some soldiers who were the first to undergo the enhancements found themselves experiencing strange side effects. Their bodies were growing stronger, faster, and more resilient, but their thoughts were becoming erratic, their emotions harder to control, and their very humanity seemed to be slipping away. Still, despite the risks and uncertainties, the potential was too great to ignore. Humanity was desperate. They needed this power to survive, and so, with the knowledge of what might come, they decided to move forward. The relic would be humanity's last hope against the Dominion, and with it, the balance of the war would shift forever. The time for hesitation was over. Earth would fight back with everything it had, and this time the Dominion would face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered before. The first tests with the relic were nothing short of extraordinary. When the energy from the object coursed through the subjects, their abilities grew exponentially. What was once thought to be a man's limit was shattered instantly. Soldiers who could barely lift a heavy weapon found themselves tossing it across the room with ease. Others could sprint faster than the eye could follow, while others displayed feats of strength that seemed to defy logic. But the true wonder lay in their minds. Each person who underwent the process showed marked increases in intelligence. Their reflexes sharpened, and their perception expanded beyond normal human range. It was a breakthrough the likes of which humanity had never known. But there were consequences. The changes, though astonishing, were not without a price. Every soldier who received the enhancement felt the strain. Their bodies stretched and warped to accommodate the immense power they were being gifted. Some had headaches that lasted for days, others could barely sleep, and the worst, those who couldn't control the surge of energy found their temper growing volatile, their instincts turning savage. Despite the scientists' best efforts to regulate the process, it was clear that humanity's first experiments with the relic had opened a door they could not easily close. Among the first to volunteer for the enhancement were the soldiers who had once been ordinary members of the resistance. They were the best of Earth's fighters, yet even they had struggled against the Dominion's seemingly unstoppable force. But with the relic's energy now fueling them, they became something more. Their senses heightened, their muscles stretched to new limits, and in their minds, the fog of doubt that had once clouded their judgment cleared away. They were no longer ordinary soldiers. They were something entirely different. As more volunteers stepped forward, the vanguard was born. This elite group of enhanced soldiers was quickly deployed to the front lines of the war. No longer did they need to hide underground or in the shadows. Now they could strike with deadly force. Their enhanced speed and strength gave them an edge in combat that the Dominion had never anticipated when they stormed the battlefield. The Dominion forces were caught off guard. They had expected a desperate, disorganized resistance. What they faced instead were human soldiers capable of feats they couldn't comprehend. The Vanguard's first mission was a daring assault on an enemy stronghold located deep within the heart of the Dominion's operations. The Dominion had placed a massive communications relay there, one that allowed them to coordinate their fleet with precision. If it was destroyed, it would disrupt their ability to wage war on Earth for a critical period of time. As the Vanguard advanced, they cut through the Dominion forces like a knife through butter. Their enhanced agility allowed them to dodge the alien weapons that had once been their downfall, and their new strength allowed them to take down massive war machines that previously would have been impervious to human firepower. But even with all their new abilities, the soldiers felt the strain of the relics power their minds. Though sharper, began to experience strange disturbances, flashes of images and memories that didn't belong to them at all. The line between who they were and what they had become started to blur, and for some, the strain became unbearable. During a particularly fierce skirmish, one soldier, Private Ethan Cole, lost control of his new abilities. He charged into a group of Dominion troops, his fists a blur of motion. But in his rage he began attacking indiscriminately, his mind overwhelmed by the power coursing through him. When the dust settled and the battlefield fell silent, it was clear he had slaughtered not only the enemy, but also several of his own comrades. The incident shocked the Vanguard and raised serious questions about the nature of their newfound strength. The soldiers had never intended to become mindless warriors. Their mission had always been to fight for humanity's survival. But as they witnessed Cole's breakdown, they realized that they were walking a dangerous line, one that could destroy them as easily as the Dominion might. Despite the risks, the soldiers pressed on. Each mission they carried out was more successful than the last, and with each victory the humans learned more about their limits and the cost of their power. The Dominion, once so confident in their ability to crush humanity, began to falter. They did not expect this level of resistance, and they certainly did not expect humanity to adapt so rapidly. The war was far from over, but now, for the first time, the aliens had a reason to fear humanity's resolve and its capacity to evolve and survive. It wasn't until the Battle of Sector 9 that humanity truly felt the first glimmer of hope in the war against the Dominion. The Vanguard, bolstered by their enhanced strength and agility, had been tasked with a dangerous mission: taking down one of the Dominion's flagship ships in orbit above the Earth. This ship, the Gorath, was the heart of the alien command structure. Its communications relays sent orders to hundreds of warships, while its weapons could decimate entire cities with a single strike. If humanity could destroy it, that would cripple the Dominion's ability to coordinate their forces and disrupt their war effort at a crucial time. The attack was set to take place in the dead of night. A small group of Vanguard soldiers, led by Captain Leah Hawk, would infiltrate the Gorath and disable its communication systems. Once that was accomplished, a team of engineers would target its main reactor and destroy it from within. The rest of the fleet would stand ready to provide backup from the planet's surface in case things went wrong. But they were counting on the element of surprise. The Dominion wouldn't expect a full frontal assault from human soldiers, let alone enhanced ones. As the Vanguard squad, now numbering 12, made their way towards the Gorath, their shuttle cloaked by human-made technology, the team moved in absolute silence. They had trained for months in preparation for this strike. But even so, the weight of the mission was heavy. Every member knew that if they failed, it would be the end of humanity's resistance. As they entered the outer atmosphere, the ship's gravity well began to pull on them, but their enhanced strength kept them steady as they docked within the belly of the Gorath. The squad slipped from the shuttle's hatch and onto the cold, metallic floors of the alien vessel. Their movements were calculated, precise, each step echoing in the silence of the ship as they advanced through dimly lit corridors, avoiding the alien patrols that seemed too slow to detect them. Now, as the Vanguard senses had sharpened beyond normal perception, they could hear every footstep and see every movement before it happened. It was as if they had become a part of the very ship itself. They reached the heart of the communications hub without resistance. The Dominion had no idea that humans, enhanced humans, could move this swiftly. It was a turning point for the Vanguard, a realization that their enhancements gave them more than just power. They gave them the ability to outthink their enemies as well. They were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. Captain Hawk approached the main console and, with a swift motion, disabled the Dominion's communications systems. The Gorth was cut off from the rest of the fleet for the first time in months. The Dominion ships would be blind to each other as chaos erupted among their ranks. The Vanguard could feel the tremor of victory already, but their task was far from over. The countdown to reactor destruction began, and the squad moved quickly to reach the core. As they sprinted through the ship's tunnels, they encountered the Dominion's elite soldiers, alien warriors that had been trained to repel invaders like the Vanguard, but the enhanced humans were prepared. The battle that followed was brutal and swift. The Vanguard tore through the Dominion's defenses as though they were made of paper. Their agility and reflexes outmatched the aliens' weapons at every turn. What had once been a hopeless fight for humanity was now a clash of titans, where the human spirit proved more resilient than anything the Dominion had ever faced. As Captain Hawk set the charges on the reactor and the countdown neared its final seconds, a momentary silence filled the ship. The calm before the storm. But it was a silence that carried a new weight, because for the first time since the Dominion's invasion began, humanity was no longer on the defensive. They had struck first. They had won their first major battle. The Gorth exploded into a brilliant fireball in the distance, its destruction sending ripples through the Dominion fleet. In orbit below, the survivors of the Vanguard squad watched from their ship as the shockwaves rippled outward in the vastness of space. Humanity had done what no one thought possible. They had crippled the enemy's ability to strike with precision and had proven that the Dominion was not invincible. But even as they celebrated their victory, the Vanguard knew the war was far from over. The Dominion would retaliate, and humanity was still far from prepared for the battles to come. But that first victory, against all odds, had rekindled something in the hearts of the human race, a belief that they could win, and that belief would become the foundation of their resistance against the Dominion's unrelenting assault. The victory over the Gorth had sent shockwaves through the Dominion, but it also ignited a new fire within humanity. The first real taste of success had stirred something deep within their collective soul. The Vanguard soldiers were hailed as heroes, and their names became symbols of hope for the fractured Earth. Their enhanced abilities were now seen as the key to turning the tide of war. Every soldier who underwent the process was celebrated, but beneath the surface, something darker was brewing. The very power that had given them victory was beginning to take a dangerous toll. The effects of the relic's energy were becoming harder to ignore. As the Vanguard soldiers' enhancements grew stronger, so too did the side effects. The strain on their bodies had worsened. The enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence came with a growing sense of instability. Every mission, every battle, every victory left them feeling more unhinged. Their emotions were harder to control, their impulses less predictable. Captain Leah Hawk, once a calm and focused leader, found herself struggling with her temper. Her mind raced with thoughts that made it harder to concentrate on the mission, and worse yet, she could feel herself withdrawing from her team, as though something inside her was pulling her further away from the person she used to be. It wasn't just Leah. The entire Vanguard unit was starting to fracture. The once united group began to show signs of disarray. Private Ethan Cole, the soldier who had lost control during the mission to the Gorth, had become a shell of the man he once was. His eyes, once filled with resolve, were now hollow. His actions on the battlefield were swift and deadly, but there was an underlying fury in him that couldn't be contained. The more he used the relic's power, the more it seemed to consume him, and the others weren't far behind. The enhancement that had made them stronger was also pulling them apart piece by piece. The human body was not designed to handle such immense power, especially not for extended periods of time. As the Vanguard soldiers became increasingly more reliant on the relic's energy, their bodies began to change in ways that were terrifying. Their skin began to take on a faint glow, their veins pulsed with unnatural energy, and their reflexes, once honed and controlled, began to feel less like their own and more like an outside force pushing them forward. It was clear that the relic's gift was not without its costs, and with every battle, the price of using it became steeper. Despite the mounting toll, the war raged on the Dominion, stunned by their loss of the Gorath, retaliated with a series of devastating counterattacks. They brought out more powerful weapons and lethal tactics, striking Earth's remaining strongholds with pinpoint precision. The human forces were pushed to their breaking point, and the vanguard were once again called upon to spearhead the counteroffensive. But this time, the pressure was different. The soldiers could feel the strain more keenly. The fear of losing control haunted them with every mission. Private Cole, now struggling with his own violent tendencies, lashed out during a covert assault on a Dominion base. His once precise movements had become erratic, and he nearly killed a fellow Vanguard soldier in a moment of rage. The incident shattered any sense of unity that had remained within the group. The team was no longer just fighting the Dominion. They were now fighting themselves. Captain Hawk called a halt to their next mission, forcing the team to take a step back and reconsider their next move. Their enhancements, once seen as the key to victory, had now become a curse. They could not control the once unshakable resolve that had driven humanity to fight for its survival, was starting to splinter as the soldiers realized the very power that had given them hope might be the thing that would destroy them all. As the human forces dug in for the next wave of Dominion attacks, the question that hung in the air was no longer just how to defeat the enemy, but whether the cost of victory was worth the toll it was taking on the soldiers who had become humanity's last hope. The relic had given them the strength to fight, but at what cost would that strength ultimately come to be? Humanity was on the brink of a new kind of war, a war not only against the Dominion, but against the very power that had made them strong. The true price of victory was beginning to reveal itself, and the Vanguard, the symbol of humanity's hope, were beginning to wonder if they were even capable of surviving the war they had been forced to fight. As humanity's war with the Dominion escalated, the cracks in the Vanguard's unity began to widen. Every victory felt more hollow, and the soldiers, despite their enhanced abilities, grew increasingly unsure of themselves. The relic that had once been their salvation had become a source of unease and fear within the ranks. Captain Leah Hawk, now carrying the weight of leadership as never before, knew that their current path was unsustainable. She could feel her own strength waning. The power from the relic no longer an asset, but a burden that clouded her judgment with every decision. It was during this dark time that an unexpected transmission was received from the Dominion. A message sent not from their warships or commanders, but from a single, high-ranking defector, a being named Toran, once a fleet commander under the Dominion's iron fist, now cast aside by their leaders for reasons unknown. He had a simple offer: an alliance of sorts between humanity and a faction of Dominion defectors who had grown disillusioned with their empire's conquest-driven agenda. At first, humanity's leadership dismissed the message as a trick, a Dominion ploy to fracture their resolve, and sow confusion within their ranks. But Toran's plea was persistent and different. He spoke not from the position of conquest or superiority, but from one of survival. He described a Dominion in turmoil, with internal fractures beginning to show, dissension within the ruling class, and a growing movement against their tyrannical rule. The war, he claimed, was no longer a cause worth fighting for on their side. Toran made one thing clear: the Dominion's leaders had grown corrupt. Their plans for subjugation were no longer just about control. They were about power for power's sake, no longer grounded in reason or even a desire for galactic peace. This had led many within their ranks to break away and seek a different path, but the power struggle that had taken root within their empire meant that any traitors would be hunted down and erased from existence. It was a bold claim, and for the first time in the war, the humans found themselves faced with an opportunity for more than just survival. They had a chance to end the war before it consumed everything, but the question was whether they could trust Toran and his followers, and whether they could overcome the deep suspicion that ran through every human heart after so many years of brutal conflict. The decision was not easy for Captain Hawk and her leadership team, but the Vanguard were running out of options. The Dominion's continued attacks had pushed them to the brink, and even with their enhanced strength, The soldiers could feel the toll of the war on their bodies and minds. They had no choice but to take a risk. With war still raging on all fronts, a small group of diplomats and military strategists met with Torren's faction on a neutral world, one of the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Hoping to hammer out some kind of arrangement, the negotiations were tense and fraught with distrust. But slowly, bit by bit, a fragile understanding began to form between the two sides. Torren's group spoke of the Dominion's corruption, of how they had come to view conquest as an endless cycle of death and destruction, rather than a means to bring unity to the galaxy. He promised that they would aid humanity in their fight against the Dominion leadership in exchange for a new future, one that did not revolve around oppression and warfare. It was a gamble, but it was a gamble humanity had to take. The Dominion's power was fading, but so was their own morale. The alliance with Torren's faction, though risky, presented an opportunity to strike at the heart of the Dominion in a way that their current strategies could not. While the terms of the alliance were still being negotiated, the humans received a message from their own forces. It was a success. They had breached Dominion defenses on a distant planet, forcing a full retreat of their fleet. The Dominion, it seemed, was weakening from within as the internal strife Torren had spoken of began to spread like wildfire across their ranks. Humanity's forces now had the knowledge and the means to finally challenge the Dominion at their core. And with the help of the defectors, they had a chance to shatter the Empire's stranglehold on the galaxy for good. It was a victory in the making, but the cost was still not fully realized. As the two forces, now allies, prepared for their first joint strike against the Dominion's inner circle, Captain Hawk felt the weight of the decision settling in. The fight ahead would be one of the hardest humanity had ever faced, and with the uncertain alliance hanging over their heads, they would need to trust each other more than ever. The war was not over, but humanity's path forward was clearer now. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future where peace could rise from the ashes of conquest. The alliance between humanity and the Dominion defectors, though fragile, was beginning to show promise as the two forces combined their strengths and knowledge for the first time in the war. They had a real chance of striking at the Dominion's core, where their leadership and ultimate power resided. It was a bold plan, and every step taken was a gamble. But with the stakes so high, there was no room for hesitation. Torren, the Dominion commander turned ally, proved invaluable in guiding humanity's forces toward the heart of the Dominion's empire. He knew their tactics, their strongholds, and most importantly, their leadership hierarchy. He spoke of a planet called Caldorath, a massive fortress world located deep in Dominion space. It was the seat of their ruling class, a place where the most powerful figures in the Empire resided, and where the ultimate decisions were made regarding the fate of the galaxy. This planet was also where the relic's origins could be traced. Torren revealed the same alien technology that humanity had been tapping into had been at the heart of the Dominion's rise to power for centuries. They had long since mastered its use, shaping their war machines, their ships, and their very soldiers through its influence. If humanity was to truly end the Dominion's reign, they would need to confront the true source of the relic's power, and, with it, the foundation of the Empire itself. The task ahead was daunting. The forces needed to infiltrate Caldorath were unlike anything humanity had ever assembled before. They would need to be swift, precise, and, above all, unified. But beneath the shared goal of victory, tensions remained within the alliance. Humanity's soldiers, though strengthened by the relic's power, were still struggling with its effects on the outside. They appeared unstoppable, but within, cracks were forming. Their mental states were deteriorating, and their humanity was slipping away. They were becoming something less than human, unable to fully grasp the cost of their power. Torren's defectors, too, were divided. Not all of them had the same ideals. Some were motivated by a thirst for revenge, others by a desire for control, and others still by the need for redemption. Humanity was not the only force grappling with its own identity, and the line between ally and adversary grew thinner. With every passing day, trust was in short supply, and though their common enemy united them, no one could deny the underlying suspicion that threatened to fracture the alliance. Despite this, the plan moved forward the combined forces, humanity's vanguard, and Torren's defectors. Assembled in secret on the outskirts of Dominion space, they were preparing for the greatest assault humanity had ever undertaken. Their goal was simple: reach Caldorath, breach the fortress world, and dismantle the Dominion's leadership before they could mount a counterattack. The relic, humanity's last hope and greatest curse, would play a pivotal role in the final battle. The journey to Caldorath was long and fraught with danger. Dominion patrols and advanced defense systems stood in their way at every turn. But for the first time in the war, humanity felt something akin to hope. The vanguard, though fractured, fought as a unit, no longer just soldiers but symbols of resistance. They had fought too long to let this moment slip away. The defectors, with Torren's leadership, provided crucial insights, their knowledge of the Dominion's tactics proving invaluable. They had, in a way, become part of the very solution that had once seemed impossible. As they neared the planet, the reality of the mission began to settle in. The atmosphere around Caldorath was thick with tension. The last bastion of the Dominion's unyielding empire, the time for diplomacy, for alliances, for hesitation had passed. It was now a battle for the future of humanity, for the very essence of what it meant to be human. Captain Leah Hawke, her mind frayed from the relentless use of the relic's power, stood at the helm of the strike force. She looked to her soldiers, knowing that this was the moment that would determine their fate. She saw the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes, the fear and the determination mixed together. She felt it in herself too. The fear of what they had become, the fear of what they might lose, but also the knowledge that they had no choice now. This was their fight. This was humanity's final stand. And as the fleet entered Caldorath's atmosphere, their destiny was no longer just theirs to shape. It was the culmination of everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed. And as the Dominion's looming fortress appeared on the horizon, humanity's fate hung in the balance. One final battle awaited, and it would decide the cost of their survival. The assault on Caldorath was unlike any battle humanity had fought before. It was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of every person, every hope, and every dream that still flickered in the hearts of the human race. The vanguard, scared by the power of the relic, were determined to see this through to the end, even if it meant sacrificing the last shreds of their humanity. As they descended into the atmosphere of Caldorath, the sky seemed to darken, as if the very world knew that this was a turning point in the war. A heavy silence gripped the fleet, broken only by the distant hum of engines and the occasional crackle of static through the comms. The final stage of their mission had begun. Torren's defectors led the way, guiding the human forces toward the heart of the fortress world, where the Dominion's leadership awaited. It was a city-sized stronghold built into the very core of the planet. Its defenses nearly impenetrable. The odds were stacked against them, and they knew it. The Dominion's elite guards stood ready, waiting for them to arrive the moment the strike force made landfall. The battle would begin, and there would be no turning back. On the ground, Captain Leah Hawke stood at the front of the vanguard, her mind swirling with the power of the relic. She could feel it coursing through her veins, an unstoppable force pushing her forward, but it was also pulling at her soul, tearing away at what made her human. With every passing moment, she struggled to stay in control, to remain the leader she had once been. But it was getting harder as the power of the relic twisted her thoughts, her emotions. "We finish this together," she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled on the hilt of her weapon. She turned to her soldiers, each of them bearing the same haunted look. The relic had given them strength, but at the cost of their very essence. They were no longer just soldiers. They were something more and something less. They were humanity's last hope, but in so many ways, they had already lost. The strike force split into two groups, one led by Hawke and the other by Torren. As they infiltrated the Dominion stronghold, the city was a maze of towering spires and vast, empty corridors. But the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance, signaling that their presence had been detected. They fought their way through the city, battling against Dominion forces that seemed endless. The vanguard's enhanced strength and speed allowed them to cut through the opposition with brutal efficiency, but it was clear that every battle was costing them more than they realized. Every swing of their weapons, every rush of adrenaline, seemed to pull them further into the abyss of the relic's influence. But they pushed on, reaching the inner sanctum of the Dominion's leadership chamber, where the alien rulers awaited. Their faces were cold, devoid of the emotions that had once driven them, perhaps because they too had been touched by the same power that had now corrupted humanity. The final confrontation was swift, brutal, and chaotic. Captain Hawk clashed with the Dominion's highest-ranking official, a towering alien being who had once been the very symbol of the Dominion's power. Their battle raged through the chamber, their movements a blur of speed and strength. But as Hawk's hand struck the final blow, she felt something inside her snap, a breaking point she had been pushing toward since the moment she had first touched the relic. The power, once so exhilarating, now felt hollow and empty. The Dominion's leadership had fallen, but the victory felt like nothing more than an illusion. As the smoke cleared and the battlefield fell silent, Hawk looked at her soldiers, her comrades, and knew that they were not the same people who had begun this fight. The relic's power had given them the strength to win, but it had taken everything from them in return. The war was over, but humanity was left to pick up the pieces of what remained of their world and of themselves. The Dominion was no more, its grip on the galaxy shattered, but at what cost? As the vanguard gathered around the ruins of the leadership chamber, their faces solemn, they knew that their victory had not come without sacrifice. The relic, the power they had once embraced, had taken more than they could ever repay. It had turned them into weapons, and in doing so, it had stolen the very essence of who they were. And yet, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, Captain Leah Hawk made a silent vow. Humanity would rebuild. They would reclaim their humanity from the ashes of war, no matter the cost. Even if they could never undo the damage the relic had caused, they would forge a new future, a future not built on power, but on the hope of what they could still become, despite everything. The war was over, but the journey of humanity, of who they were and who they would become, was just beginning.